Hello children, happy to see you again. I am Dakshayani, handling biology from Bharathidhasanar Matric Higher Secondary School, Arakkonam. Children, today the topic of discussion is about 12th standard botany, the first chapter, asexual and sexual reproduction in the plants. And in this we are discussing about the pollination, right? And we are discussing about the agents of pollination. So, first let us see about first we discussed ornithophilous flowers. What will be ornithophily? Pollination by birds. And the second type is that pollination by bats. What is the name children? Crypterophily, the pollination by birds. Usually the bats are nocturnal. What do you mean by nocturnal children? Nocturnal means active during night time. Active during the night time, we call it as nocturnal. Bats are very active in the night and they are attracted by the smell, that is the scent produced by these flowers. And now let us see what are all the two plants which undergo crypterophily, right? First one is the Cagelia africana. What's the name children? Cagelia africana and Adansonia digitata. And mostly these flowers produce a very big fruits, right? And here the flowers produce large quantities of nectar also, right? Nectar, it is a food for the birds, most of the birds, especially the bats, right? So here these are all the two plants. So how the bats pollinate these flowers? Let us see children. In this plant Adansonia digitata, what you can see, the stamen is like a ball. Stamen is like a ball. Stamens are male gametes, right? So what happens? The bat holds this stamen ball and sucks the nectar from the flower. So while sucking the nectar, the pollen grains get attached in the chest of the bats. So when the bat approaches the another flower for the nectar, the pollen grains from the breast get attached to the stigma of the another flower. This is how the pollination takes place through the bats. So what are the two plants children? Cagelia africana and Adansonia digitata, which undergo crypterophily. And now let us see Malaccaphilly. What is Malaccaphilly children? Malaccaphilly is a pollination by snails, slugs and snails, right? Example, lemna. These plants are floating, right? Floating plants, and when the snails crawl on it, what happens? They help in pollination. They transfer the pollen grains from one plant to the another plant. So the example for Malaccaphilly is lemna. What is the name? Lemna. Right. Next we are going to study about the entomophily and myrmecophily. What is entomophily children? The study of entomology is the study of insects. The plants which undergo pollination by insects, we call it as entomology. The examples are helianthus, sunflower, right? Insects, and this one. What is this? Very attractive, right? Bougainvillea, right? They both are insect pollinated flowers, right? So to pollinate the insects, it should be very attractive in color. It should produce a nectar, very brightly colored, right? So these are all the two flowers. Many flowers are there. The examples are these two. And what are all the insects that pollinate the flowers? Is the bees, theni, moths, butterflies, and many other flies, wasp, colavi, right? And beetles in the sense vand, all comes under the entomophily, right? Entomophilous, which help in the pollination. And myrmecophily is a pollination by ants. Pollination by ants is a myrmecophily. So I will ask you some question children. What is Malaccaphilly? Yes, pollination by snail. Yes, very good. And Dhanush, answer my question. What is myrmecophily? Pollination by ants. Very good. Okay children, now we are going to see the characteristics of the entomophilous flowers. What is entomophily? Insect pollinated flowers, right? So it should be very large, right? And if it is small also, they are aggregated in dense inflorescence. What is the meaning of this children? You can see sunflower is very big, but when you take in the case of this bougainvillea, small flowers, right, are attached in the same inflorescence. We can see a bunch of flowers together. So it will be like that. It will be arranged in such a way. Next, they are brightly colored, right, very attractive. Such a, what are the colors? Orange, red, yellow, right. Next, flowers are scented to attract the insects and they produce nectars. And next here, this pollen grains, some suck the nectar, but it some insects consumes the pollen and it produce, example, bee. Bee consumes the pollen grains and produces bee pollen, right. And next here we can see some flies and beetles, right, they are attracted by the foul odor. What do you mean foul? Bad smell, right. So some flowers or produce a foul odor to insects, the beetles. Beetles in the sense vand, right. And next one, in some flowers juicy cells are present. In some flowers, instead of nectar, some juicy cells are there, so that some insect sucks the juice from that such cells, right. So these are all the characters of the entomophilous flowers. So children, now let us discuss some important interesting pollinating mechanisms. The first one we are going to discuss is about the liver mechanism, next a translator mechanism, and later the trap mechanism. So first one is a liver mechanism in the plant called salvia. What is this, children? Salvia. Salvia, right. So this is a original image of this salvia and it is a insect pollinated flower, and here it is protandrous. What do you mean by protandrous, children? Pro means first, androus means male. So protandrous means male part, that is andrecium. Andrecium matures first. Andrecium matures first and later the gynoecium matures. Protandrous. And next here corolla is bilabiate. What is bilabiate? Two lip-like structures. You see, one corolla is like this and another one is like this. So bilabiate, right. And here it has two types of anthers. One is sterile and another one is a fertile. What do you mean by fertile, children? Fertile means it can produce the pollen grains that helps in reproduction. Sterile means they cannot produce the pollen grains which reproduce, right. So it produces two types of anther. One is a fertile and another one is a sterile, right. So now we can see how the pollination takes place. Here when insects, right, comes to take the nectar, you can see the bee. If we imagine this as a bee, children, what happens? It gets inside the flower, right, and so what happens? It touches the sterile stamen. Now what happens? They both are connected by a connective tissue. So when the connective tissue is disturbed, what happens? The anther bends down. Now this pollen grains are dusted on the back of the insect, right, and when the same insect visits the another flower, right, the pollen grains on the surface of the body of the insect get attached to the stigma. And now what happens? Here, now the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma and now here the fertilization takes place. So this type of mechanism, this movement, we call it as liver mechanism. So which plant undergoes liver mechanism, children? Yes, very good, salvia. And next mechanism is the translator mechanism. Translator mechanism from one to the another plant. And now let us see what are all these things. It takes place in the plant calotrophes. What is calotrophes, children? Ericampu, right? Ericampu, it is calotrophes and belongs to the family Apocynaceae. What is the family? Apocynaceae. And here we can see the flowers are bisexual. What do you mean by bisexual? Both the male and the female part are present in the same flower. And with the 5 stamens forming the gynostegium. What is my gynostegium, children? The male part is attached to the stigma of the female part, right. So such a type of unity we call it as gynostegium. And here you can see, and what is pollinium, right, we discussed already what is pollinium. Here the microspores are attached to the what? Anther, that we call it as pollinium. Here the pollinia are attached to the clamp-like structure called as a corpusculum. Here you see, children, this structure is very important. It is a pollinium, right. Here it forms like this structure, inverted Y-shaped structure like this, right. So, here we can see the polonium are attached to the sticky structure called as a corpusculum. Here this is a polonium and it is attached to the corpusculum, and both the corpusculum are joined together by the connective called as retinaculum. The filamentous and the thread-like part arising from the polonium, we call it as retinaculum. So, this is the polonium. They are attached to the thread-like structure called as retinaculum. And now, if you see the structure, how it is, it looks like an inverted Y, like this, right. So, we call this as a translator, right. So, when the bees or some insects, butterflies visits the calotrophes, this polonium get attached to their legs or proboscis. What are proboscis? Which is used to suck the nectar, right. It attaches to them, and when it reaches the another flower, this polonium is deposited on that the stigma of the another flower. This is how the pollination takes place in calotrophes. And what is the mechanism called, children? Yes, very good Arun. Just clap your hands for Arun. That is translator mechanism, right. And now we are going to study about the last mechanism, that is trap mechanism. What do you mean trap? Trap means pudichu vechikkiradhu, right. Trapping, right. So, pollination we are going to say in the plant Aristolaceae. What is the term? Aristolaceae, right. This is a flower, children. Aristolaceae very huge in size, and here you can see the flowers are axillary. What is the axillary? When the flower is present at the tip of the flower, it is said to be axillary. Here the flower projects outside the plant, and here you can see perianth is tubular, right. It is in the shape of the tube. Perianth is tubular in shape, and here you can see the basal region is swollen, right. And when you see the inside structure, children, in this tube like structure, many hairs are present. Here the anther will be present, here the anther will be present, and here many hairs like this. Many hairs will be present. So, when the insects approaches the flower to take the nectar, it is trapped by the hairs present inside the flower. So, this is how the inside of this flower will be, and here the basal region is swollen and possesses the gynostegium. Already I told you what I mean by gynostegium. If the stamens, male part, fuses with the stigma, it is said to be gynostegium, right. And here when the flower is at the young stage, the flower will be very erect. So, the insect cannot escape, it is trapped by the hairs present inside. And now what happens when the flower becomes old, right? What happens? The flower withers its anthers. What am I withers? Kottiradu, right? Anthers are withered and the flowers bend. And the hairs also get destroyed inside the flowers, and now the insect escape outside with the nectar. So, this is a trap mechanism which takes place in Aristolaceae. So, what are the three mechanisms we discussed? Yes, very good. First one is a lever mechanism, translator mechanism, and then the trap mechanism, right. So far we have discussed about the pollination by biotic agents, children. So now let us see what are the advantages of self pollination and cross pollination, and their disadvantages too. So first, advantages of self pollination. What is a self pollination, children? They no need any agents, right. The male and the female part are present in the same flower. So here the pollination is certain in bisexual flowers. What we say as bisexual? If male and female flower or female part, that is anoecium and gynoecium, are present in the same flower, we say it as bisexual. And here some plants, right, the species may be separated through the long distances and the pollination is not possible. Cross pollination may not be possible. So in such plants they pollinate by the self pollination. And the another one is that cross pollination, when takes place when cross pollination fails. In some plants cross pollination, that is a pollination through the agents, may fail. In such plants self pollination is very advantageous, right. And next, disadvantages. What is the disadvantage of self pollination, children? Same type, right, same type of flowers are produced. That is, there is no, the chances of producing new species is very rare. There will be no variation. Same species will be produced, and here repeated self-pollination leads to weaker. The generation may become weaker. So, these are all the advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination. So, now let us discuss the advantages and disadvantages of cross-pollination. So, here we can see what happens, children, it is quite opposite to the self-pollination. Here it produces the healthier offsprings. The generation produced is very healthier due to cross-pollination, and here the germination capacity is also very better, right. After reaching through the cross-pollination, when it gets sticked into the stigma of the flower, the germination of the pollen grains takes place very easily, and now here new varieties are produced, and here since it undergoes a cross pollination, it can be adapted to the environment very easily. Any changes in the climate may be adapted by this cross pollinated flowers. And next, disadvantages in that it needs to depend on some agencies. It cannot self pollinate, it need a bird, it need a insect to pollinate. And next one, here various devices has to be adopted, right. Since it has to attract the insects, it should be colorful, it should produce more nectar, it should be bigger in size. So, lot of mechanism must be produced by these plants. So, this is a disadvantage in the cross pollination. So, children, with this the session comes to an end. And what are all the advantages, significance of pollination, children? Pollination is the process by which the male and the female gametes fuse, and it is the main process by which the fruits are produced. Without pollination, we do not get the fruits. So, go through this topic nicely, children. From this you can learn we may get the 2 mark question, advantages and disadvantages, and from the mechanisms any of the 3 mark questions may be asked. Take down the diagram in a separate notebook and work on the self-evaluation answers. Thank you, children. Have a nice day.